Okay. Yeah. Yeah. And that's totally fine. Good to record. I think we're still trying to figure out kind of some strategy around how we're talking about this in our Double Up Food Bucks Oregon legislative campaign. So I think I would just ask if you're going to share it more broadly, just to check in with us first. But yes, so happy to be here. My name's Mason, they, them. I'm a Double Up Food Bucks organizer at Oregon Food Bank, and I'm also joined by my two other colleagues here. So I'll, not knowing everyone, I'll just kick it to one of them. But I think really broadly, my role on the team is basically doing a lot of work with our community ambassador group, as well as different community leaders, to just make sure that our program is as accessible to everyone in the state as we can make it. So yeah, Diadira, would you like to go next?
Yeah, thanks. Hi, my name is Teodora. Pronouns are she, they. I am the Double Up Food Bucks coordinator at the Oregon Food Bank. And I just really help find new stores to launch Double Up, as well as helping them throughout the process of getting fully launched. I'll pass it to Ryan.
Hi, all, I'm Ryan. I use he, him pronouns. I'm the Double Up Food Bucks program manager, and I get to work with Mason and Diadera. So we'll talk much more about our work. I also work a little bit with Jazz, and I know Lindsay. I'm feeling really good. A lot of exciting, friendly faces here. I'll pass it to Lindsay.
Thanks, Ryan. Lindsay Grosvenor, I use she, her pronouns. I am with Oregon Food Bank as their strategic partnerships program manager based on the Ontario branch. My interest in this conversation is how I guess in part knew Ryan previously. I was working with Valley Family Healthcare and to help to implement a produce prescription program there. And so I'm still offering some local support for the partners that are continuing to run that program. And I shared this meeting with them in hopes that they might hop on, but I don't see them here. So I will be more of an informant, and just kind of nice to know what's happening with this. So thanks for having me, and I will pass it off to Jen.
Hi, I'm Jen Coate. I use she, her pronouns. I did my practice experience with OCFSN over the spring, and I'm just still gathering information about all the amazing things that are happening, and I might be doing a proposal on a project with VeggieRx, so I'm trying to just gather information also. I'll pass it to Sammy.
Well, we're not going to make Sammy talk because you're recovering from wisdom tooth surgery. Thanks for joining us still. And I'll pass that over to Ecole.
Hey folks, my name is Ecole Copen. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm over at OHSU. I'm a dietitian here, and I wear a bunch of different hats. I run the farmers market, and I think about VeggieRx programs. I help do some evaluations, or I did in the past, but we think about having them in the future. But the other reason I'm here is because we have a convenience store on campus that we recently turned into a retail establishment so that we can add SNAP. And I was really curious to know where the crossover, because I heard from Oregon Food Bank that there's some possibility for Double Up Food Bucks and SNAP. So I was like, ooh, that's cool. So I'm just gathering information. Thanks.
Jazz, why don't you go ahead?
Hi, I'm Jazz. I use she, her pronouns, and I work at Oregon Food Bank too, health equity organizer, and also similar to other folks, wear a bunch of different hats in my role, but work primarily with community members. And VeggieRx is one thing that a bunch of folks are interested in, learning more about how to access their programs, or maybe starting a program connecting healthcare systems and growers and farmers together to maybe think about expanding this work. So yeah, I'm just here to learn. I don't think I have anything in particular that I'm looking for, but yeah. And I'll pass it to Kelly.
Hi, I've been trying to get my headphones to work because I could barely hear anyone over like lawnmowers and random noises. But my name is Kelly. I just started working for High Desert Food and Farm Alliance. and I'm the VeggieRx program manager. So I wanted to hear what the meeting is all about and yeah, just meet everyone. And my background is in nutrition.
All right, thanks so much everyone for doing those quick introductions. Mason, do you want to jump right in, or do you want me to give you a look, give everyone else who is in this room? Because I know some folks, you know, like Nicole have been around and working with the VeggieRx working group at OCFSN for a while, but a lot of folks here are much newer to their roles. So
yeah, I think, you know, if we could just take like even 5-10 minutes, I think just being newcomers a little bit, at least I'll just speak for myself with VeggieRx. I think we just wanted to be in a learning space, just maybe like to just capture a really broad summary of like, what does VeggieRx work looks like in Oregon, maybe just a brief history and recap of how the programs operate and like what the landscape is. I think that would be just cool context for our team.
yeah. I'm happy to give like a very high level one, just because for context, I've been with OCFSN as staff since April of this year. I was contracting since summer of 2021 and just relatively new to the food systems work. But like I said, I'm a generalist. So because part of my role as network coordinator is to also provide support to each of the working group coordinators. And so Kaylee and Michelle weren't able to be on this call today, but you know, Michelle just joined us as one of the co-facilitators for this group, and she's with Yasuke Commons, or previously known as Yasuke Farm. And then Kaylee currently works at OHSU, but previously ran the VeggieRx program for Adelante, and so just a wealth of knowledge there. And the last time that we've done any sort of census of Oregon VeggieRx programs was in 2022. And I believe it was January when the report came out. And so that I linked in the meeting notes, in the meeting notes section of November 21. And that will show the results of the survey that was sent out to 11 different programs across the state. And we haven't done one since then. So right now, we are, you know, like Jen mentioned, and there's a couple other masters and PhD students who are doing masters of public health related degrees, who are in the process of pulling together a work plan for doing research again, to essentially check in and be like, where are we? What programs are still here? What programs have changed and shifted? I mean, Kelly from High Desert Farm Food Alliance, I know you're new to the role, but last year, HDFFA didn't do a VeggieRx program, but this year they're doing it again. And, you know, in prior years, we have data from that. And just from my kind of external like look in, it appears that most VeggieRx programs across the state of Oregon, you know, have to figure out their own funding. They have to figure out their own processes, and everyone kind of manages things completely differently. And that was part of the reason why this particular working group was created, was to say, how do we not reinvent the wheel every time that someone wants to, you know, give more access to folks in their areas. And so one of the cool projects was the, you know, going paperless, moving away from paper vouchers and, you know, into using debit cards with Fresh Connect. That was tested out and piloted and has been successful so far with both Adelante and Thrive Umpqua. And then there's a few other organizations that are interested in adding on, I think, in the next year. And then part of the reason we had paused the monthly VeggieRx meetings was in like the last month through the end of the year, was also realizing we've been talking since summer about the potential of creating a collaborative GusNIP grant for this upcoming year. And so that's something that we're hoping to do, like mini convening style, which is like the 2 hours deep dive plenary and breakout groups, to be able to, in early 2023, to be able to figure out what does everyone need and want, and what is realistic for us to like pull together. So hopefully that was kind of a good overview.
Yes, thank you. I think, we're just learning a little bit, and that was just helpful to kind of get like a little bit of history, a little bit of what y'all have going on. And maybe our team can also pop in and read that report that you mentioned, Shin. I think I can share my screen right now. Let me know if you all see. This is just I just
Yep.
wanted to kind of orient us to Double Up, I guess, for folks that aren't familiar. Double Up Food Bucks basically is a $1-for-$1 match, SNAP on SNAP dollars. So for every $1 that a SNAP participant spends at a participating location, they get $1 in Double Up. And I thought this was a good tool to just show you all like some highlights from this year. So right now we have a total of 32 stores that have been approved to participate, and that's in 20 different counties. And then we also have 22 stores that are currently running Double Up Food Bucks. And then in addition, as some of you might be familiar, on the farmers market side, that's led by the Farmers Market Fund, and they have about 70 farmers markets participating. And then I believe we're at least over 30 different CSA farms as well. So Oregon Food Bank, we focus on the grocery, corner store, kind of online retail environment. And then we also have 2 other partners that work directly with farmers markets and farms. Yeah, and like we're a sub-awardee of both federal and state funds for this. And we're gonna be launching 4 stores, hopefully very soon now. This is a little out of date, but we are working on our current cohort of stores. And I think the main thing I'd love to highlight in this update is just that we're really excited to be expanding to the kind of Willamette Valley, Salem, Marion County area. We haven't had a grocery store down there yet. So we're gonna be launching El Torito Supermarket and Meat Market in Salem. And then we're also looking at some sort of relationships with some of our banner stores. We're doing a pilot of Double Up at the Safeway Lakeview location. And the reason that came about was Safeway, has been working actually up in Washington State with partners to develop Double Up at the market. And it's an interesting model in that they're basically, still doing the 1-for-1 match, but they've been able to kind of offer the coupons through their like digital app. And it's been interesting to kind of explore with them kind of how delivery can work in more of like a banner store setting. And then, we distribute a lot of Double Up Food Bucks. In fact, we distributed almost, $250,000 just from July to September of this year. We're on track, I believe, to distribute, hopefully, I'm going to maybe misquote, and Ryan, you'll have to pop in here. I think we're on track to distribute 1 million just this year. And really, like, a big part of our work the last couple months has been a focus on bringing on what we call culturally familiar stores. So, corner stores, grocery stores that, maybe Oregon Food Bank had an existing relationship with, or it might be a new relationship. And we know that they're offering a lot of the culturally familiar items that our pantries, sometimes it's really difficult for us to source. And so really wanting to focus on Double Up partnering with creating not only access to fresh fruits and vegetables, but things that people want and need that are culturally familiar to them. So just highlighting here that we did have 30% of our total incentives cover like stores that were in our culturally familiar category. So that was a lot of growth from last year. And then we also work with an ambassador program, and these people support the program in terms of our culturally responsive outreach. And we also have done a lot of work with the ambassadors that we'll talk about in our presentation around like community feedback loops and thinking about how the program is being delivered and what the SNAP shopper experience is, and really centering on how are we developing this program in a way that's responsive to not only SNAP shoppers, but like their experiences using the program and using the different vouchers or card technology, while also definitely keeping in mind the experience of farmers and businesses, because if we think about like the 3 people that are involved in a Double Up Food Bucks transaction, it's really like SNAP shoppers, but it also can be farmers and it can also be business owners. And so I think our goal, I mean, I guess I'll just speak for everyone, really, but I think our goal is we really want that transaction to be smooth for everyone. But most importantly, who we want it to be smooth for is the person experiencing hunger, right? So that is really the focus of a lot of this EBT integration work. And we can kind of move into that now, but I just wanted to give y'all kind of some overview of Double Up. Before we do that, does anyone have any questions on this stuff?
I'm just curious if at some point I can look at those links that you have at the bottom of that page, because I'm curious.
Sure. Yeah, we'd be happy to send that stuff out. It's like our grocery store recruitment flyer and things of that nature. So yeah,
Thank you.
we can definitely. Okay. Great. Well, does anyone else has any other questions? Because I kind of just like went over a lot, so I just want to give a little more space for that. Okay, I don't have access to my notes on here, but we can move into EBT integration. So basically today, the goals of this presentation is going to be able to give everyone a really kind of a timeline of where the Double Up Food Bucks program, like where we've been, where we're right now and where we're hoping to go. So kind of past, present, future. Like we've been piloting now for 2 years. Like, I mean, we were in a pilot as of 2020 when COVID hit. So we've had a lot of learnings and we've really kind of been able to use community feedback processes to inform what direction we want the program to go in so that we can continue to evolve this to something that SNAP shoppers can really easily access. So if we kind of just really like focus on, you know, what is EBT integration? Essentially what we're talking about is we're saying, let's take the current, you know, system that DHS uses that, you know, many hundreds of thousands of people use in the state of Oregon and use it to deliver Double Up to SNAP participants. So I think for this group, one thing that I wanted to kind of highlight is, you know, Double Up is specifically tied to SNAP eligibility. So for someone to use Double Up, they do need to be already on the Oregon Trail card and SNAP, someone who can receive SNAP benefits in our state. And so that is a pretty key difference in terms of our program delivery. And so that's kind of in terms of the different tech pathways we've identified. That's why we've really identified EBT integration as sort of the best fit for us because given that folks need to be eligible for SNAP and we already have this incredible resource of the card, it really just was a total win-win for us in terms of like the possibility for it to be earned and redeemed directly on the EBT card. This is just kind of me sharing like the background of why. I mentioned before that, you know, when we first piloted the program, we were, and we still are, like operating within a certain amount of options in terms of how the program gets delivered. And so on the grocery side, those options include a receipt coupon, a 50% discount, or a loyalty program. And those three models that we're using to deliver the Double Up Food Bucks discount are working, but they also can be confusing in terms of that every single store you go to, the program works differently. So we were hearing a lot of feedback from SNAP shoppers of like really finding it difficult to kind of figure out how to use the program across different locations. So I think the idea of like there being consistency in how we're delivering the program is a con, and that's something that we've identified. And also that was us really just having to work with the existing technology that we have, right? So, you know, prior to thinking about incorporating this to the card, we were working with the capabilities and still are of the point of sale systems of our stores. And so it's not that those, you know, those are all great ways that customers benefit from coupons and perks at stores. But when we think about, you know, someone who is on SNAP and going to a store, it can feel really stigmatizing to kind of also be receiving like paper vouchers or physical things as like a separate payment option. So we were really hearing this feedback in two different spaces. One is through the Partners for Hunger Free Oregon SNAP Client Advisory Board. And so we were engaging with them and hearing this feedback of like, this program sounds great if I could only figure out how to use it. And I think that's like something we really heard loud and clear, that it was actually like the fact that it was so complicated and stigmatizing was actually deterring people from using this resource that's taxpayer funded. It's kind of it's a disappointing thing to hear as a program practitioner. Also, SNAP shoppers just want to use the program at the places where they already use their Oregon Trail card to shop. So pretty early on, as we started to think about like, how are we going to scale this, or how are we going to make it so that we can engage with a broader amount of stores or farmers so that they can plug into this, it became really clear that we were constantly going to have to create basically like individual solutions all the time. And really with like this being tied to the Oregon Trail card, we then can just have the only requirement be that store or that farmer's market or that farmer accepts SNAP as a payment, instead of constantly having to create these like very curated individual solutions depending on the context that we're working in, which, as you can imagine, becomes a lot of work. So I would just say that really at the end of the day, our top goal is to improve shopper experience. And then we also see this as a pathway that basically supports more not only scaling so that more stores can participate, more farmers can participate, more farmers markets can participate, but also we create universal access for all SNAP participants. Because right now, unless you're the person that walks into that community and sees the Double Up flyer and then goes to your farmer's market and uses it, you may or may not know that you're entitled to this benefit. Unfortunately, it's not on people's SNAP eligibility letters that they receive in the mail that that Double Up is an additional program. That's something that we're working on, is to get it on the eligibility letters so that folks like hear that they are eligible for this. But there's just a lot of inconsistency around usage, because it's not just something that people are automatically entitled to. You kind of have to find out about it and then know how to use it and then go and use it. So it's not really being delivered in a way that is in line with a lot of our equity values. So these are all things that we identified in our feedback themes. And then we were very much like in a learning space at the national level in terms of other states that were exploring EBT integration, and really saw the writing on the wall that EBT integration solved for a lot of these themes that we were exploring. So with that, I just want to kind of put us in the context of, how is Double Up being distributed now? And then I will kind of continue to talk about like, well, how do we want to change the way it's being delivered? What are we trying to move towards? Currently, you have basically a couple different ways that Double Up is distributed. One is that if you're in the farmers market space, you're going to receive a $2 farmers market coupon. So essentially you go to the info booth, you swipe your card, and for every $1 of SNAP, you get a dollar of Double Up, and they just happen to do it in $2 increments. You also, as I mentioned before, can use a loyalty program or a receipt coupon or an automatic discount, depending on the point of sale, system that a store uses. We've made those three options work in grocery. So essentially someone's getting like a receipt, generated coupon right at the bottom of their receipt that shows them how much Double Up they earned. They return to the store, the cashier scans it, and then they automatically get that amount taken off their bill. In the case of the loyalty program, it's almost like it's being stored on their account. And so when they go into the store, they just have to let the cashier know their account number. And then essentially the money is, in their loyalty program account and comes off their bill. In the case of the discount, this has been a really great way to work with our smaller like retail partners that their POS may not be set up for something like a loyalty program or receipt generated coupon. So we can just offer a flat 50% discount up to or equal to the transaction limit, which is $20. So anytime someone goes in, they're buying some produce, they're going to get 50% off that produce up to or equal to $20. And last but not least, the CSA or farm space, the way it's working is you basically get a discount at the time of purchase. So I'm not a full expert in this, but my understanding is like when someone goes to pay for the full cost of their CSA, they automatically deduct the double up credit towards the total cost, and then they pay the total cost of the share minus the double up food bucks credit. So that's how it's working in the CSA space, the grocery space, and the farmers market space. So then why did EBT kind of feel so appealing to us in terms of kind of moving towards this as a solution to get away kind of from the other ways that double up food bucks is currently you know, happening in these different retail environments? I mean, essentially one huge thing was just that from the Snap Shopper feedback we received, we really wanted the transaction to feel like other transactions, that, you know, folks feel very othered when they have that paper coupon or that paper receipt. And so it can feel very stigmatizing. It kind of, some people want to be very private, maybe, that they receive SNAP, and it kind of automatically creates a situation in which they have to talk about the fact that they are on a benefits program in public, which feels really awkward. As someone who's been in that position, it's definitely weird. So we just wanted to have it be like, if you have a card, you essentially do the transaction just like everyone else. I mentioned this before, but also just being able to choose when and where they shop. So having this on the SNAP card just creates way more flexibility, because SNAP is already a pretty universally accepted currency as long as that store has the authorization, or that farmer has the authorization, or the farmer's market has the authorization. Yeah, and then on the store side, I think I just want to highlight some key things, because when we talk about EBT integration, it is really important, I think, from an equity perspective, to center on the ways that this would improve Snap Shopper experience. But we also have good news in that the farm and business community would also benefit from this. And here are some ways that they would. First of all, there's no invoicing or reimbursement for the vendor. So actually, in terms of the way reimbursement works right now, is if I'm a small business owner, I am going to go ahead and basically be giving that amount of double up produce away to my customers, and then I'm going to get reimbursed later on by Oregon Food Bank in the case of grocery. In the farmers market space, as a farmer, I'm also front loading that double up, and then I may be getting reimbursed on a monthly basis. So in this case, even though like the store or the farmer would need to get SNAP authorized, their reimbursement is going to be a lot quicker, and they're also not going to have to do any invoicing. And then there's also just overall a huge administrative burden that gets lifted for both shopkeepers and farmers alike, because now you're working with a single system instead of multiple people. So there's been a lot of ways that EBT integration has felt extremely appealing, in terms of basically just making this process of receiving this benefit more simple, not only for SNAP shoppers, but also the business owners and farming community as well. So let me just like walk you through what an EBT integrated double up experience would be like. So you would shop for your produce, you would get rung up like normal, you would check out with your EBT card. And the way we would like to explore implementing this, and again, to be clear, we haven't implemented this, we're just trying to work out kind of the steps to doing this. But the model that we've seen that other states are adopting that we really like, that we would like to explore, is essentially that customer is going to earn their double up on the produce that they buy. So let's say I have a bunch of apples in my cart. I buy $5 worth of apples. I'm going to earn double up on the $5 worth of apples. So I will essentially earn $5 additional, but it's going to get rebated back to my general EBT account. And the reason we like this is because it still incentivizes people buying fruits and vegetables, which is at the heart of the Double Up program. But we also give people more choice as to what they want to do with those earnings. So let's say you have a dietary or medical condition and you really need to get your oat milk rather than your dairy, cow milk. Well, all of a sudden you have an extra $5 that you can put towards that, actually plant-based milk, instead of, having to buy the cow dairy milk or no milk at all. and you kind of get all your needs met, but you've actually earned that extra money by buying more fruits and vegetables. So we see it as a win-win in terms of expanding SNAP shopper choice and people being able to account for especially the higher prices that we see for our staple goods in stores. But we still incentivize people buying more fruits and vegetables, which we know is a good thing. And Double Up has proven time and time again is absolutely helping, positively impacting people's health. So that is the ideal model we would like to see, because it empowers shoppers to be able to use this resource in the way that best meets their dietary or medical or even culturally specific food needs. Like, let's say you really want to use your benefit to buy your rice and beans, you can do that. And it is really nice because you still have gotten some extra fruits and vegetables. Nicole, I see your hand up, so I'm gonna stop ranting and let you ask a question.
It's so great. I just had a clarification question. So they can use that credit anywhere. They don't have to use it in that store. I mean, it has to be EBT eligible, but
Correct. Yeah,
they
right.
don't have to use it right away. They don't have to use it on fruits and vegetables.
Right. I mean, basically it would be a credit that would go onto your Oregon Trail card. So you also, let's say you earned it at your local store that's participating, you would also turn around and then use that at the farmer's market, which we've actually heard a lot of in terms of stories coming out of Michigan where they've done this, where it's basically what we call interoperable. So essentially your benefit can be used across different outlets. They have a lot of evidence of people earning the Double Up benefit in grocery and then turning around and being like, oh my gosh, now I have this extra money I can bring to the farmer's market that I didn't feel like I had before, and then using it at farmer's markets. So I mean, it's That's really a credit
cool.
that then can be used at your discretion depending on what you need. Yeah. So this is just a theory. Again, this isn't what is happening currently. It's just, this is the model that we like, but we want to be able to consult with SNAP shoppers about it, which leads me to what is happening when we talk about EBT integration. So here's a couple different models. We have Massachusetts, also Washington and California. These are 3 other states that we are also, they received similar feedback from SNAP shoppers. They saw that this was a potential way to solve for that feedback. And then they've created they're a little bit further down the road than us. All 3 states that you see here on this slide have actually secured state funding for their efforts. So they're on their way to actually launching a pilot of SNAP EBT integrated Double Up. And then these are some decisions that we saw them make. So for example, you can see all 3 models, they decide to have it be that it was earn on fruits and vegetable, but redeem on SNAP eligible, right? So that exact scenario I was just talking about, they decided to follow that because they really felt, again, if the goal is to improve SNAP shopper choice, that's the model we want to follow. They also had gotten some SNAP shopper feedback that led them to make that decision as well. I'm going to get into monthly cap in a little bit, so I'm not going to necessarily get into that here. But the highlights from this slide, I feel like, is we have a lot of states that are pursuing this as a solution. So we've been able to learn from them in terms of not only the ways that they're engaging SNAP shoppers in the process, which feels incredibly important, but also just what kinds of decisions are they making and how can we maybe replicate that in our own state. So I think that's been a really helpful part of our process. Okay, I'm going to move us on. So once again, this is a little repetitive, but just to really hit home the model, the program delivery would be, I'm a SNAP shopper. Whenever I buy fruits and vegetables, I then get more SNAP dollars back on my Oregon Trail card to spend on either more fruits and vegetables or, like I said, that other product that my family wants and needs based on my situation. And I think this is just a really awesome pictorial version of that. I'm going to move us forward. Okay, let's get into household monthly cap, because this is really where we start to talk about why is EBT integration kind of connected to universal access to programs like this. So one thing that Washington and California and other states, especially Massachusetts, where they have actually successfully run an integrated program, and they actually ran it at farmers markets. And what they saw is, yes, when we lift barriers for people to be able to use programs like this, guess what happens, everyone? People use them. It is crazy. So Massachusetts, they did this, and what they found is, yes, people went bananas and used it a lot. Definitely a good thing. Bad thing, we don't want to be running out of funds as program practitioners or as state agencies and leaving people out to dry because, sorry, we ran out of the money because we didn't manage it. So the household monthly cap is all about saying, okay, we have now improved this program that more people can access it. And guess what? Now we have to create a solution so that we make it equitable and fair as to how much everyone gets, right? So let's say we have 300,000 SNAP eligible people in the state of Oregon. We probably will need to do some math about what should the monthly cap of Double Up be that every single household should be able to get based on things like household size. So I know in Washington, they have come up with their cap based on the household size because that feels most fair in terms of the amount of people in the household that are going to be receiving that produce. And I think another key point here that I want to make is some people go, well, that feels tough because, like, what if, you have some people that are really using a high amount every month and all of a sudden they're not gonna be able to use that. I mean, data has shown us that on average in Washington, the average amount of Double Up that a SNAP shopper uses is about $50 a month. So when they determined that the cap was like anywhere between 40, 60, 80, we're actually not that far off from the monthly average in terms of if we looked at data of how often this program is getting used. So I think the fact that it's informed by what the data has shown us in terms of average monthly use, we're on track. And I think we still would need to do some number crunching in this area. Okay, I'm not being great about time, so I am gonna kick it to Ryan and ask for his forgiveness for maybe going a little too long. But Ryan, would you like to chat about our planning process here in Oregon? Thanks, everyone.
Yeah, no problem. And you are the slide mover, yes? Awesome. You're even commenting live right now. I love that. Let's just click to the next slide then. So talking about getting Double Up Food Bucks onto the Oregon Trail or EBT card, this slide tries to boil down what the costs and requirements and changes that need to happen. We've identified that the state agency and the EBT system itself will need to be changed, both the contract and then the process for which EBT eligibility happens. For SNAP incentive programs, this really makes sense for us to get Double Up Food Bucks onto the Oregon Trail card because the way that the program is delivered requires SNAP payment. And so there's no extra steps for participants. And the ability to get it delivered through the state's payment infrastructure, like Mason went through, really helps to solve for a lot of the administrative burden and also the complexity of the program at the shopper level. Just like the delivery of any payment at the retailer end, there's also a lot of costs and requirements to make any program work. And so the first step will be state agency changes. And then from there, we'll be designing the changes at the transaction level. I don't know how deep you all have gotten into the delivery of VegARX, but I think some of the reasons why programs aren't integrated onto these systems as easily is because of the complexity of the technology at each store. Often we use like the metaphor of car dealerships and car companies to describe what point of sale systems look like in a retail grocery setting. There's so many different makes and models. There's so many different folks who are selling them. And then there are so many different folks who work on those softwares. And so working with grocers, that's a big thing that we've seen. So we're making individual changes now to get these programs operating at the store level, and EBT integration will allow us to make these changes for a systemic change. So we could work with the POS hardware providers to get the system set up to work through the state agency and then down the payment chain through there. All right, so next slide, Mason. We are have been spending this year in a planning process, starting to do just like some discovery and learning. And a big part of this was just trying to determine what our scope would be for this project. So our goal is to improve shopper experience, increase accessibility to Double Up Food Bucks, and then also really create the infrastructure to scale this program efficiently by integrating it onto the card. We're hoping that this pilot project, the planning process, will determine a program model for the state that we can implement and create the technology requirements to make it work, and then actually outline a plan to pilot this in 2024. Next slide, please. So like I said, in spring and summer 2022, we did a lot of discovery, building relationships, talking with other states. We participated in a community of practice of folks who were trying to get Double Up and SNAP programs onto their state's EBT systems. And then we've been working closely to update Oregon Department of Human Services and their SNAP team and discuss what options there are and what their timeline and feasibility looks like to come on board with us. And that's been a great conversation. We seem very much value aligned, and they have lots of other modernization projects underway, but are excited to participate in the scope of our plan and to contribute to making these changes. So what we've been doing right now is figuring out our scope, having key partner meetings. This is a great space for us to connect and talk more with practitioners and folks who might even be a great fit for helping to inform the process of us putting together our plan. So right now we're really refining it, and we'll be hiring some project consultants and start kickoff meetings with stakeholders this coming spring. Next slide, please, Mason. So this is the way that we really see the planning happening, is that we're first going to determine a program model that is feasible for the state's EBT system. We're hoping to generate that with a lot of community input, both from current SNAP users and participants, SNAP incentive, Double Up Food Bucks program users, and then also the broader stakeholder groups of folks that are utilizing and implementing Double Up. That process, one of the key outcomes will be that we have a model, we understand what our requirements are going to look like for a participant SNAP customer journey, that folks, when we meet with our tech companies, that we can really articulate what it looks like to have a transaction that is going to provide a positive experience for both retailers and shoppers. And then shifting from there to really understanding the cost and requirements and determining the needs for this project. So like I said before, I think kind of a summary of that is the EBT database has to get updated. At the retail transaction level, things need to get updated. And then for our farm direct and farmers market partners, sometimes those transactions are a little bit simpler, but they still involve payment processors and some form of a third-party processor that will be figuring out what the needs are. And then 2024, we're hoping that we have a group of outlets that will be implementing the program. It'll be actively working, and we can test and learn from it and see what it looks like for our group to move it forward as an idea for scaling across our Double Up Food Bucks outlets. You can go to the next slide, Mason. This just kind of zooms out and shows a little bit more about what the roadmap is. And I think if there are questions later, we can definitely share this out. Do we have it? Any more slides after this, Mason? Maybe one more? Yeah, and I think this is really, oh, cool. I think that's a good high level summary of what our planning process looks like. I would just point to the second point on here about the technology requirements and cost. Part of our refining and planning process right now is just figuring out who's going to be engaged in the scope of Double Up Food Bucks. Right now, Oregon Food Bank represents the grocery side of the program, and we have direct partnerships with grocery retailers. And so we are excited to move this forward. Farmers Market Fund and farmers markets, I think there's interest for it, but they're trying to figure out if they have the capacity and feasibility to commit to determining a model that they want to pilot. And then CSA with the Pacific Northwest CSA Coalition, they have decided to participate in the planning process and are hoping that they could pilot something in 2024 as well. All right, well, I think that's what I plan to share about the process, and it would be great to hear from other folks, and I'll kick it back to Mason.
Yeah, no, thanks everyone. I mean, we just threw a lot of information at you, so if people need to digest, but I think we could definitely be happy to answer questions, and there might be some questions we don't know the answer to yet because we're trying to figure them out too. But yeah, I'm curious to just hear from folks in the room, and I can stop sharing in a minute here.
I have another quick question if nobody else wants to jump in. So the three models that you described, the 50% off, the receipt-based, and then like maybe getting some kind of coupon for later, are those currently happening at the various stores that you're paired with, partnered with? Yeah, okay. So this EBT integration, where we go back onto the card, is the new format, and that's maybe okay. That's awesome. So then my follow-up question is, like, I wrote it in the chat, but like we aren't even accepting SNAP yet at our retail place, but we're working towards it right now. And if there's any way for us to get, we don't have the equipment. None of the equipment is going to integrate with our current POS system, so it's going to have to be a separate POS system. And I'm so curious, like, how do you designate? Like, it looked like there was a really cool little summary at the bottom that would come out at the bottom of your EBT receipt that says something like incentive matched, incentive redeemed, and total monthly incentive currently used. And I'm curious, how does the POS system know which items are redeemable, or like that you get credit for? Fruits and vegetables, like, do you have to identify those? And then if you have suggestions of POS systems that we should get on so that it would be easier to potentially pilot this in the future.
Yeah, definitely. And I would say that we'd be happy to meet with you offline and talk really nerdy and techie about your point of sale system and flagging eligible items. I think Diadera and I would be happy to set up a call with you and get into that. But I think at a real basic level, we try to work with the grocery inventory system to be able to actually flag the items there. Some states use the WIC approved products list and pull just the fruits and vegetables off that because that's a technology that some point of sale systems are using. But I just always go back to my metaphor of like going to a used car dealership and like, are you using a Dodge, and like, is there a mechanic in your area? Like, there's a lot of questions around what you'll be using it for, who will be servicing it, and what kind of software support you'll have. And we definitely could have some recommendations. And I also think that where the technology is at is that there's really a need to develop solutions for all of the different types of hardware and software folks are using. And we're trying to solve for what's best for both the retailer and the shopper. And that's kind of one of the major reasons why I think EBT integration in the SNAP incentive space is something a lot of states are moving forward to, because it's trying to look at it from a systems level and say, like, let's have a really clear way that the program gets delivered for the whole state. And then yeah, we can connect to each POS hardware developer and say, like, what's it going to take to build it in so that whoever's selling it and supporting it, it's baked in just the same way that they would have like pricing baked in, or the idea that you'd want to total itemized receipt. Like, there's a lot of capabilities that are really simple right now, but promotions, especially promotions that tie to any type of eligibility or tender, like a payment structure, are pretty complicated from a software standpoint. And a lot of point of sale systems just don't even consider that. Like, why would you want to set up a promotion that has to first communicate with the state's agency to make sure you have enough dollars in your account, and then come back and then retotal the transaction and give a promotion and then do that chain again? And so sometimes I think the simpler solutions that we're utilizing now make the most sense until there's like technology set up that makes those things a little bit less complicated.
If no one else has more specific questions, I feel like I have a ton of random questions because everything that y'all have shared just brings up a lot. And I guess for context, for folks who don't know me, my educational background was in supply chain management and marketing. And like pre the food systems work, it was in retail. And so I'm curious about part of the scoping process of like what organizations and like programs across Oregon were in that cohort of like that discovery phase. Because I know like for us in this particular VegRx working group, we tend to hear a lot from, the High Desert Farm Food Alliance, Marion Pope Food Share, Adelante, and Thrive Umpqua, and a number of other orgs. And I think my understanding is a lot of them are working with farmers markets, so that's not necessarily relevant to what you're doing right now. But then I know that some maybe do work with some smaller retailers, but in some cases, VegRx programs, I think sometimes it's more like with a particular retailer in that particular small like rural area that they're in. So yeah, I guess just trying to understand what are, I guess you already mentioned some of those major retailers that you're working with. Now I'm just reading through I don't know what my full question is. I think it's just it seems like a lot to scope out.
Well, I know, and not to like overly jump in, but I think, Shin, you bring up like really good, if we were to write out like, well, so as with anything, what are some challenges? And I definitely think a big challenge when we talk about EBT innovation for rural markets and rural farmers markets and farms, we have to contend with the tech gap, with the internet gap, and like the fact that Wi-Fi access is going to be part of this conversation. So I definitely think that, whether we're going to solve that is like in our little silo, not sure, but I think that we have to be tracking with that issue of like folks experience internet access really differently in different parts of our state. And so like what is happening alongside of our efforts to make sure that like if we are digitalizing like any of our programs and folks now suddenly have to kind of have either, like steady Wi-Fi connection, or if we're going to tie it to an app and make it phone based, like what other barriers does that create? So it's like, it feels like with this program, for every barrier we try and solve, we sometimes create a new one. And it just depends on what audience we're talking about. So those are definitely things that we've gotten feedback about and we're definitely thinking about a lot. And the reality is that in many states, it's kind of been a conversation of like, what makes sense in grocery retail for scaling, and what makes sense in more of a farmer's market, farm CSA space. And, Washington is doing a lot of work right now to engage with their farm CSA community in terms of EBT integration. And so I think we're really tracking with that to see like, how does that go? What do they learn as a state? Like, are they successful in supporting the farmers to have that SNAP authorization so that that goes well, like what challenges or things come up in their process. We're all like in a very much a learning space about this. And when we look at like what's administratively happening now, where people are counting things by hand and like waiting for payment, clearly we're not in a great scenario now. And whatever we create, right, we don't want to create like more problems for our farm and business community or more problems for our Snap Shopper community. It's like, how can we think of all of these stakeholders around the transaction and actually like think through the different issues that each person is going to face, and then have a conversation about how to best solve for that. And it might take some compromise, and also like that's going to be probably what we face no matter what solution we come up with. So it's just been a really interesting journey of like really mapping out, and that's why it's so important to have more folks part of this conversation. So I'm really glad y'all reached out to us to be like, hey, what are you doing? Because it's like we're kind of like, we're over here doing stuff, and also we don't really know what we're doing. So it's really important that I think we talk all together about how are these different nutrition incentive programs operating, and how can we make them as easy to access as possible while also streamlining it for all the partners involved. So yeah, that's my little soapbox, and I'll step off of it now.
No, Mason, that was great. And yeah, I mean, I think all of us know there is no one size fits all solution, but can we do our best to do a lot of the upfront legwork to make sure that we create something that catches the most folks, and then solve for what's a little bit more needs to be customized. I know we are at the 2:01 mark, so I want to be respectful of everyone's time and just say thank you so much for joining us today and sharing all the information, and whatever you're open and willing to share presentation wise, that'll really just get linked to whoever's on the VeggieRx email list. Same thing with this recording, if that's all right, but feel free to send me a note after. Okay. Yeah. And I definitely have one other question if you have time for. So it sounds like there's, we haven't really even talked about VeggieRx at all. It's really just about this like integration, and like even just being folks already being able to accept the Oregon Trail card, right? So I guess what I'm wondering is, before we can even talk about like VeggieRx being able to get onto any of that integration, is there, because like for our VeggieRx programs, we have a couple things, kind of handbooks on how to start a VeggieRx program. These are the kind of elements and ways to stand one up and things to consider. Do you see getting retailers or getting whatever vendors ready for like EBT as that, like, does that exist anywhere, of kind of like a handbook of like, that needs to be step one before you can even consider all of the other things down the line?
Well, just to be clear, so like, are you talking about like specifically VeggieRx, and or just in general, like any like Double Up and a retailer that wants to start?
Yeah, I think all of those, because I'm wondering if all like Double Up and like if that tends to come before like a VeggieRx is like, if in terms of accessibility, because and the other thing that I'm always curious about, because I'm not as deep into the weeds of how these programs work, is where are the overlaps, and what's easier or less easy or more accessible, like, and they're just different. Thanks, Ryan.
I mean, let me know if this isn't answering your question. I think kind of the short of it is like the fact that we do have different eligibility requirements, like Double Up is SNAP contingent, at least as it is right now. And what VeggieRx, to my understanding, is not SNAP eligible contingent. That is a big factor when we think about like, does it make sense, right? Like, I don't think it probably would make sense for you all to explore becoming SNAP eligible, because we're trying to get out of that. Like we're like, dang, I really wish Double Up wasn't SNAP eligible contingent. So I think like things like the Food for All campaign that we're also like hoping to support is like a step towards expanding SNAP eligibility, which obviously then increases Double Up eligibility. But when we think about like, it wasn't on our slides, but I would name like the fourth barrier that we know is a consistent pattern, not only in our state, but across all states, is the fact that Double Up is tied to SNAP and therefore excludes a lot of folks based on their status. So, I think the ability to keep your program open and flexible and serve more people is always a good thing, right? So I don't know if it would be a fit for like folks who are doing VeggieRx to consider integrating with the Oregon Trail card, in that you would then have to have SNAP eligibility be a factor. And at the same time, sometimes I do dream of like, wouldn't it be nice as a person who is interacting with all these programs, you wouldn't have like 17 cards in your wallet? Like Jazz and I were kind of joking about this morning. It's like, it'd be nice to just have like a food access card, and then depending on what you're eligible for, you could like have certain things load onto it. And I just don't have any examples of that nationwide. Like, I think no one has cracked the code about how to reconcile eligibility and like digital card delivery yet. Like, I think, it's a whole thing. Is that helpful? And yeah.
No, that makes a lot of sense. And I'm glad you kind of re-emphasize the SNAP eligibility is one of the potential barriers of the Double Up Food Bucks accessibility, kind of, but that's a thing to consider that I think the VeggieRx programs don't necessarily have to. So that's really helpful. And just, again, reiterating the Food for
Right.
All campaign.
Totally. Yeah, totally. And like, I mean, yeah. And I think, right, like a thing to think too is like who, because of, it like I'm just thinking like, oh yeah, like who maybe doesn't feel safe going to a community health space based on their identities too. Like, I'm sure there's all kinds of ways that folks choose to not go places because of their experience. But I just, so I think it's like none of our programs are perfect. They're never going to be. And we'll try. And I'm also really curious, like while we're at these crossroads, to definitely be open to exploring possibilities like around technology, because if we can use technology as a way to simplify how our people in our state interface with these programs, I think we'll be way better off than having everything. Like, if there is opportunities for collaboration, like let's do it, because it's all these solutions are very expensive and time intensive, and it does make sense to me in my mind to be like partnering where we can when there's overlap in it makes sense. That's my thought.
Yeah, definitely. Did anyone else have any questions? Because I don't want to.
I think Kelly had a couple, or at least one in the chat about asking, unless it got answered and I missed it, about is the money like front loaded? Is that what you were asking, Kelly? Or does everyone have to invoice Oregon Food Bank in order to be reimbursed for the Double Up Food Bucks dollars?
Oh, that was my question. Yeah, I was just wondering.
Oh, sorry, it was yours, Jen. Sorry.
Yeah, no, that's okay. Just as you were talking about how it would be better to incentivize business owners and farm owners about like not having to invoice or getting reimbursed. Is that what happens now because of the paper and like loyalty programs and reward stuff?
Correct. So they are basically, like out that money until we reimburse them, which I would definitely say like we have now an internal administrative system where we can do that relatively quickly, like I believe a month's time. But for the farm process, I believe it's upwards of 3 to 6 months that it takes to reimburse. And so like actually a lot of farmers decide not to offer Double Up because they just, and I don't blame them. Like being out of that amount of money for that long is sometimes not achievable, especially for like a lot of our emerging small farmers, right? And like that capital flow, you just can't miss out on it. That's your seeds, that's your compost. So I do think it will answer to actually a lot of the administrative hiccups and participation hiccups that we see. But of course, one thing that consistently comes up that I want to acknowledge in this space is, yes, the farmer, like either a central agency or the individual farmers themselves then may need to get SNAP authorized in order to accept the payment. Like there will be other challenges, and we have to weigh out, are those challenges worse or better than the current challenges that we're facing? And I think that's like with any program improvement or change model, it's like, okay, we're weighing it out. What's going to make the most sense? And we're definitely exploring that right now with all the folks involved.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I know Ryan had dropped in working with Lauren Lubowicki, and I know she had been recently, I think in the last week, sent over information on Amazon Fresh. Again, not saying pro or anti-Amazon, but that also being a point of accessibility, right? Because some folks may not be able to get places. So if there's delivery options, then that Amazon in a lot of ways does do that best. So
yeah, you know, it is one of the most interesting experiences working at the intersection of like free market economy and these programs, because yeah, like I think one of the things our team is doing right now, and I know Deidre had to hop off, but I mean, she's been really leading this, is like really creating a way that we assess when bigger partners want to be involved. Because yes, like we see all those accessibility pieces, and I think we need to bring, you know, some semblance of like partnership and shared value alignment. And like I think we're kind of taking a step back and actually doing that assessment now, because we had a lot of banner stores approaching us really quickly, and we realized that we needed to actually create like an internal equity lens for how we considered those banner stores. So we are like doing this Safeway pilot with a lot of like, yeah, we are piloting, we are figuring it out. We know that that's creating accessibility in a rural place where that is literally the main grocery store. So another piece is like, yeah, what are those stores in like some parts of our state? It's gonna be in Albertson, that's what's there. So we may not, you know, Double Up is such an interesting world. And like, also I'm sure that these similar things would come up with Veggie Arcs in terms of healthcare relationships. So I think if you all ever want to chat learnings around like, how do we navigate really complex systems and ask for things that are equity based, yeah, it's always fun. But yeah, this has been an awesome chat, and I would love to keep in touch with this group and see what y'all find in terms of your path. One quick little tidbit that I just want to mention, because I do think it's important to the conversation, is I do want to just express that like a year ago, when we were first realizing that EBT integration was a pathway for, again, like scaling, making it easier, all these things, we also at that time were aware of like e-token, like that a lot of the farmers market side, where it's like essentially like states coming up with a specific Double Up card, and the token is on the card. And so the farmers market, when we did our state grant, they did put a little like project in to explore the e-token, and we've kind of been tracking with them of like, so what are you finding in terms of when we think about two different pathways, whether they're EBT integration or a state Double Up card, what are the pros and cons? Because what we were finding when we were exploring e-token, we were actually exploring e-token and piloting it at Come Through Market in Portland in the summer of 2021. And the major thing we found is it's just challenging with the e-token space, because you're no longer working with a state agency. You're working with a small, sometimes tech software company, or you're working with folks like TotalPay and Clover, and they don't necessarily have the like infrastructure and equipment and staff built up to like support the rollout of a statewide program. So like that was our biggest hiccup, especially in the context of COVID and the pandemic. We were like, oh gosh, yeah, let's just do like, I don't know, like see how this goes at grocery. Maybe we create interoperability down the line. But the biggest hiccup was that we didn't have it like the equipment sourcing or the staff. And then because it's these smaller companies and their cost of business is very high, it's really not achievable for the nonprofits to then like partner to pay the cost of doing business with those private software companies to get our solution. And so I think, there's lots of options, and then there's pros and cons within each option. And I think in our places in nonprofit agencies, I think we really have to think about like, who should be footing the bill? I mean, like, should it be the nonprofit community paying for all the tech upgrades? Should it be the state? Should it be the stores? And I think similarly, I would imagine those questions maybe come up for you all, like in the healthcare world, when we're coming up with solutions, what does that look like? So we're definitely trying to explore that in terms of who our stakeholders and partners are. And I think it's been like an important part of the conversation, because then we get to, well, depending on the new orientation too, what could actually become our work in the nonprofit sphere? Like, what if it was less about the administrative like upkeep of these programs, and what if it was about like supporting emerging farmers who want to get connected to these programs? Like, what if we were investing in that instead of like I mean, in Wise Hive, love it. We crunch our numbers, we do our thing, but like, you know, there's money going to making sure we can dole out these incentives when the state could be doing that, and we could be doing other stuff that we know people really would love to see happen. So I think that's what I get excited about, is like solving for some inefficiencies so we can actually start to like get to the work we really want to be doing in our state, and especially around this program. So I will stop talking with that, and I super appreciate you all listening to me. So thanks so much.
Really, those are all really amazing points, Mason. And it's, yes, technology is really helpful if it helps free up our time to do the work that feels more generative rather than reviewing RFPs and contracts and stuff. Yeah, no, that's awesome. And I think what you said of what was learned at the come through market really, from my external view of, I know Myra's on the call right now, but it's about what is it like working with a smaller software as a service company that perhaps has not done this before. So at the same time, it's like we're piloting things together and building out functionality together that may not necessarily exist yet. So there are things that pop up that are, one of the lessons learned from the pilot for Adelante was cards can only get swiped 5 times a day. That wasn't communicated initially. And things of like being able to know what balance is left on the card and remembering to, dial the number to go find that out, and, things like that. So yeah, totally. Would be very curious to know, as you're doing your like analysis of the different, what are the things that you're looking for, and what's that evaluation chart look like?
Yeah, totally. Oh my goodness. Yeah. Well, what's next? Should I just send you all the things? Okay, I'll send you
I
all
would
the
love
things.
all the things, and then I can kind of help organize them in a way to shoot them back out to the rest of the RegRx team. And thank you
Sounds
so much
good.
for your time
Yeah.
today.
Thank
Will
you. Thanks for
definitely,
listening. Yeah.
we will definitely connect again. And thanks everyone else for staying on. And it was great to see you all. And we'll talk soon.
Sounds good. Yeah, definitely stay in touch. And if there's other opportunities to share about this work in the OCFSN space that you feel would be helpful, please let us know. We have this presentation, so we're trying to get the word out.
This is awesome.
Yeah.
We want to host a VegRx mini convening in January and February. So
Cool.
let's connect to and see, make sure your team's available, and then we can.
Yeah, that sounds great.
Awesome.
Cool. Thank
Bye,
you.
y'all.
Have a great rest of your day. Nice to meet you. Bye.